First off, everyone needs to listen to your podcast. I think you guys are probably my most favorite industry podcast out there because you guys really teach actors how to actually be entrepreneurs, how to actually market themselves. So I also do feel like every actor should think of themselves as a business person.
Hello, friends. Just Joshua today. Well, kind of. Whenever I say that, what I really kind of am saying, like, and no Mike. Thank fucking God. Just kidding. No, I have other friends with me today, because some time ago I was able to catch the film Strawberry Mansion by Albert, Birney, and Kentucker Audley, and I was just blown away. I was just blown away. I was blown away because they made this movie for $200,000, and pretty much immediately. So give me 2 seconds. Somebody just texted me. I realized, I was like, oh, they did this on practically no money, right? And that was clear. But that was not just clear like, oh, it looks that way. It's clear because it was the intention. And so I started reading a little bit more about the movie, and sure enough, what looks like an $8 million film, even as is what looks like an $8 million film, they actually made for $200,000. And I immediately emailed Kentucker through a friend of mine and asked if they'd come on to talk about it, because I think it's an inspiration. No BS. And we talk about that. We get into why and the how and the when and the what. And I think for all of us now, at this late stage capitalistic hellscape moment, when we're sort of all trying to understand how we're going to navigate and just make our art, these guys are doing something pretty amazing. Something briefly about them. Kentucker Audley is a filmmaker, actor, musician, and the founder of No Budge, a hand-curated platform for micro-budget films celebrated by the New York Times as one of the best places to discover what's happening in low-budget cinema worldwide. His latest film, Strawberry Mansion, which he co-directed and stars in, premiered at Sundance and was released by Music Box Films in 2022. Albert Birney is a Baltimore-based filmmaker known for his wildly imaginative visual style and handmade storytelling. He's directed 6 features, including The Beast Pageant, Silvio, Tux and Fanny, Eyeballs in the Darkness, and of course Strawberry Mansion, which he co-directed with Kentucker. His work has premiered at Sundance, South by Southwest, and Slam Dance, and his film Silvio was named one of the 10 best of 2017 by The New Yorker. Cannot wait to watch Silvio, which I wish I had done before this interview, honestly. Either way, please take what you will from this, but as we end the episode with, just consider, what's the essence of the story you're trying to tell, and how can you be in a place of action always when making your art, waiting for no one else to tell you that it's time to do so, which I think is a big theme of today's episode. And I would dare say the movie, which, as I say several times, for me, is ultimately about freedom. Period. Please watch Strawberry Mansion, and please enjoy this conversation with the filmmakers. Great. I mean, well, listen, I know I'm a little late to the party here, because this is a film that obviously has been in your world for much longer than mine. And who was it? Oh, it was Betsy. Betsy, that's how we know. That's how she connected us, right? Kentucker, the amazing Betsy Brown. But I'm trying to even think now because we watched the movies a few months ago. I'm trying to think how it even came into my world, and I'm bummed that it's taken me this long. And I know you've talked a bunch about the film to a lot of different folks. So hopefully, we'll not repeat some of it. Although I will say right off the bat that I was watching the movie knowing that you didn't spend $8 million on it, because I could tell just in the ingenuity and creativity of it. But I'm super excited just for folks to hear about, which I know is in large part, especially your Kentucker's mission, just with No Budge and all. The idea of being able to create intentionally and so effectively without $8 million. And that was super inspiring to me, just watching the film, because artists stay so stagnant for so long because of such a lack of resources. And I would often argue, actually, that it's kind of a theme of the film in some way. I say it just in terms of like the by the way, as I'm rewatching your movie, ads are popping up. Do you want to put this in your cart? So
Yeah.
it's such a basic question, but I think it's important, especially because of the theme of the movie. What inspired the idea of Strawberry Mansion, and then the form in which you chose to sort of really tell the story? And rather than me being like, Albert, Kentucker, I'll let you girls fight it out, okay?
Yeah. Very good. Um, yeah, this was a long gestating project that the initial idea, it's been a couple years since I've had to talk about the initial idea, but I think the initial idea was just an image of a man in a suit with a suitcase walking towards a house in a field. And that sometimes that's all it takes. It just starts with like that image pops into your head, and then you start to wonder, okay, well, what's in this house? And personally, I would want to be walking towards a house like filled with, strange artwork and VHS tapes and an eccentric old lady, so you just kind of like build it from there. And I had uh, written a very different version of the script years and years ago. We're talking, 2010, 2011, and I met Kentucker. We met, and I sent it to him, just kind of saying, "Hey, you wanna act in this?" And we hadn't at this point made Sylvia. We barely knew each other, and there was just something that brought me to do that. And then we got to know each other on another thing, and ended up making Silvio. And then at that point, it was kind of like, let's dust off this thing and kind of put our two brains together and make this script make a little bit more sense than it did in that first stage. But yeah, it was just the first idea was just that simple. Just you get an image, and then you kind of try to connect the dots and figure out what's in the house. And okay, there's tapes. What's on the tapes? Dreams. Okay, dreams are recorded. Okay, who's this person? Oh, he's a dream auditor. It's just like kind of the things kind of connect like that. And then hopefully at the end you've got somewhat of a cohesive story.
That's so fascinating to me, because it's not a message movie, meaning it's not hitting us over the head per se with like, here's anti-capitalist whatever that. And yet, and it's funny though, because that makes actually even more sense, because as I was rewatching, so many things were popping up for me and so many relevant ideas that we'll talk about even without me reading about that you were inspired by Pee Wee Herman. Or I was watching Blue Velvet the other day, and that scene of them in the trapped in the closet, even there's like, I know that might not have even been the inspiration for it, but I see so much inspo there. And yet it does feel like even the way you've made it is a bit of a fuck you to capitalism in some ways to me. But it doesn't feel like that was at all part of what was driving it for you.
Yeah, I don't think we started with a sense of sort of a takedown on a certain way of life or a certain economic cultural system.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's ultimately I think people hear the premise and they sort of anticipate a more dystopian, pessimistic take on a future realm where government has tapped into recording dreams, and companies have tapped into being able to advertise in those. It is a dark, pessimistic, dystopian idea, but I don't think that the film really is about that, other than just sort of like this starting point to get deeper than that. I think that's all sort of surface level stuff. And I don't think we want to be hopeless in the film. And I think it seems more full of life and poetry and this possibility for like catharsis and invigoration and excitement if you don't sort of only stay in the realm of this is a hellscape kind of attitude. But also, I think your initial comment about it kind of feeling like the movie's about its cheapness, I think is very true. I think like this movie's about the adventure of making it and the playfulness and the experimentation of making a movie in this way. And so I think it's about that stuff, that process, that that camaraderie, that sort of putting together these elements and seeing what comes out. I think it's just as much about that as it is about this, like the macrocosm of where we find ourselves in our current economic system, or however we choose to live. Because that stuff sort of feels like it's more. It creates more whatever that word is, dynamism, than just sort of coming at it from a hopeless place.
Well, oh, please, Albert, please.
No, just one last little thing. It's like, I think we both, Kentucker and I, would rather, make a movie with a little bit of money and resources than wait years and years to not make anything because we're waiting for someone to come and tell us this is how to make it with this amount, and it's like the creative solutions that you come up with are the good stuff. That's like where you figure out really interesting new ways to tell the story, and just it's exciting when you can feel that. And I think because we made it for so little, just with the sheer joy of making it with our small crew, and it was just that's like that's what the movie's all about, is that kind of creativity and that letting it kind of be free versus constricted. And sometimes you have more money and it means you can do less in a way. So yeah.
Well, you just said the word. Someone asked me what the movie's about, and I know this sounds so frou-frou, but I said, well, to me, at the end of the day, it's about freedom. And what there's that moment when Preble sort of rejects Buddy. He's like, I'm not doing this anymore, and the pink house sort of falls apart, and we're sort of then in these fields because of Bella's dreams, which are so much more expansive and free because she's done it herself in a lot of ways. And I do think that your point about the parameters, which we'll really get into, it clearly afforded that. But I do just have to ask another basic question. Was it not so much fun to make? Because we know things can be great and on the back can be like, that was hell. Was it so much fun to make?
I think it was probably funner for Albert, but just because I personally was going through some issues, but I was kind of it. I'll let Albert talk. How fun was it for you, Albert?
Yeah, I mean, so it's both very fun and it was very difficult, and it's like you dream of something for so long, and it's obviously so exciting when it's finally arrived. But making a movie is difficult at any level. And when you kind of like, when I take a step back and I look back on it, it feels very fun. And the post-production went on for a very long time because we just had the time, and I really love the post-production just because you can kind of shape it. But yeah, the actual making of it was equal parts fun and also just kind of nerve-wracking. Every day there's like 1,000 little problems to solve, and I guess I think what's most fun for me is the pre-production and the post-production. Like that's just like pure, you're just dreaming and you're making,
Yes.
you're getting it all together. And then when it actually becomes time to film it, you have this like
Yeah.
this stress, this level of stress that like doesn't kind of leave you for the whole time. But you just go one day at a time and you kind of just like bust through it, and you don't sleep very well and you're a little bit cracked out and crazy, but you somehow get through it. And then I'll never forget the lead actress Grace Glowicki, who plays the
Hmm.
young Bella. She had this kind of thing that she said a couple times, which always stuck with me. It's like why do we do this? Like why do we do this? And she says we do it for the footage. Where it's like you go through this kind of like strange hellish shoot, but you do it because you get this footage at the end that is like the magic, and so yeah, I would say it was kind of fun.
And Kentucky, don't I'm not. This isn't therapy, so I'm not going to push on it. But I'm just curious. When you say like, "Oh, I was sort of going through something," do you mean like with the project, or there was outside circumstances that were just making the whole thing uniquely challenging at the moment?
Yeah, I think for predominantly just personal
Yeah.
issues, family health issues, but uh, there was also a component of being out of my element, um, being working on a project like directing a project with Albert that on a scale that we had never worked on, and involving a lot more people than our previous films. Most of those people were people I did not know, I had never worked with. It was a you know I feel like that um, was a central challenge of like kind of figuring out how the machine works
Yeah.
on a larger scale, and how to sort of navigate the different personalities and different styles of working. And Albert and I still kind of figuring out how to co-direct together. Um, that stuff wasn't, that stuff wasn't deeply unpleasant, but it was just sort of like I felt very, and I also just sort of coming from a place of non-confidence and kind of in this rebuilding desperation mode of like having tried to do this for so long and feeling like both this is our last chance, and also I have no idea how to do this, and am I cut out for this? Albert and I, every day we would joke like this is our last chance, this is the last time we'll ever make a movie. And it really felt like I didn't really, and also like working with Albert with his we came together on the script eventually, but it was his idea initially, and I really had to try to find my way into it, which took many years. And then ultimately I feel like we came in a place where it was both of us equally, but it was still just that jockeying for like, what is the vision here, and how can I see myself in this, and feel like I'm equal parts to this vision that began as Albert's. And then the last thing is just sort of acting and directing at the same time, which Albert had done on our previous film Sylvia. He had it was even harder for him because he was acting in a gorilla mask. So
Well, and you think you donned two masks in this one. I think I saw that you played the Toad and the Blue Beast later on in the second
Yes.
half.
Yeah. Yeah. And, having done Sylvia first, where I was Sylvia, but then, Kentucker also was acting in that. I think, yeah, there's kind of for me personally, I love, putting on a mask or getting in front of the camera. And also I love when we would act together, and, you know, even when we were both in front of the camera, I feel like, we had a great DP, Tyler Davis on Strawberry Mansion, who, it was our first time working with him on this big scale, but I think he really kind of became the like the really essential kind of third element that when, we always knew it was going to look really good, and if we were both in front of the camera, if we were both kind of like there was so much we were juggling, Kentucker and I, with, he was acting and just kind of like when you make something this small, you're wearing a lot of different hats, but it was good to have Tyler as kind of like, we had the support, where we knew, okay, between the three of us, we can kind of get through each scene and make our days.
Well, you you might know this, Albert, but when I first emailed Kentucker, I was like, okay, can we get the DP on too, maybe? Because actually, even before that, I was writing down an idea like, oh, Strawberry Mansion Team. Although, listen, this is a good title, y'all. Who knows if this will be the title? But I'm going. This is my working title: Dreaming in Lo-Fi Inside Strawberry Mansion. That's good. That's a good title. But I was interested in having him too, because the film is absolutely gorgeous, which we'll talk more about. I want to talk about the futurism of the film for a second, because I said, as I was rewatching and ads were popping up on the screen, it obviously, deals with truths now, but it doesn't actually feel like it's about technology of the future at all. And it more so feels like it's the sense of what that evolution feels like. So, Kentucker, both of you, but when you're at the drive-through, and there's even that like faint skyline of what the future could feel like in that world. It just feels like it's more about what it means to be a living, breathing person in an ever evolving world. And that's where the sense of futurism comes from, in my opinion. Does that feel true to you guys? And if so, was that intentional?
Yeah, I mean, it was never about sort of prognosticating how actual technology will be
Right.
used in the future. It absolutely was more of like, I mean, honestly, it was kind of tapping into what it feels like to live now, and yeah, not necessarily trying to. I think we went the opposite direction that sort of technology seems to be going in terms of the scale of the device. For instance, like everything seems to be getting smaller and smaller for the most part, but we kind of thought it would be a fun reversal if like the actual the recording equipment was actually very clunky and old, very clunky and big and unwieldy, and just to sort of suggest what it feels like to move into a new phase of technology for people who are used to the old version. And yeah, I think if we got it across, like this just feels wrong. This just feels like time is moving on in this way that we don't really have any control over, and just signifies a societal change that I don't know if anybody explicitly agreed to. Then that was the idea, rather than try to like identify what a piece of technology would actually look like.
Yeah, and like you see so much like on Black Mirror where it's like everything is just like a little dot you put on your temple or something, and it's just like,
Right.
okay, maybe, maybe that is like the sleek version of this, but it just like it feels like that's been done so many times, and B, if we can, like, we're making a film, we're creating the world, why not like make things that are really visually exciting and interesting to us? And uh it's kind of also like, wow, even though it's the future, it's 2035, which is now, only 10 years away, but you've got a lot that still feels very old. You've got the car from the 60s, you've got
Right.
the outfit from the 40s, you've got the VHS tapes from the 80s.
Right.
You have this dream recording technology, which is kind of technically the future. You kind of mix it all together and you're just like, that feels more like what the present is anyway, like your whole life you're like waiting for flying cars and kind of like, when's it going to look like the Jetsons or something? And you're always like, well, it's never really, I don't know if we're ever going to get there, it's just always going to be this kind of like mashup of different styles and times. And
well, I just want to say, Kentucker, hearing you say the thing about, there were some days you're like, is this our last movie? Are we even gonna be able to do this? What I love about hearing that is because as I was watching it, I'm like, this is a fucking risky movie. I don't mean this pejoratively. It's a hodgepodge of effects, of styles, of all kinds, and yet it somehow is so cohesive. And so to actually to hear that there was some self-doubt, but also such a willingness to work within that risky place. This is, again, to sort of restate my thesis, why I'm so interested in having this conversation and sharing with our audiences is no bullshit. It's an inspiring place to be in, to then come out the other side. I do just want to chase the constraints a little bit more, because I'm just curious if you even have words for what it did to your creative brains. Because you've said that the low budget, it wasn't just a limitation, but I think you described it as an aesthetic. So what did those constraints do for your creativity?
Yeah, I think I think it built the whole infrastructure of what the visuals were. Everything was very cheap. Everything that we built was very homemade, and like you said, it's a hodgepodge by intentionally. And I think maybe that quality is something that most films steer away from and actually throw money at, sort of this idea of making everything feel cohesive visually and on the same scale of production value. Whereas we were like, if this helmet looks like it was made for $20, that's great. And if this filming on this real life ancient ship makes it feel big, then great, or if, we use some stock footage that sort of is a nod to like a bigger budgeted film. Just throw them all in there together, and I think if the intention is just to if the intention is to experiment and to play and to be excited by the process of compiling all these elements and throwing them together, then I think it's going to work. And if the attitude is there, if the personality is there, they should all work together. If there's like an honesty that we're not trying to fool anyone, we're trying to like invite them into the just the simplicity and the childlike nature of it. Just come on in. Like we're not trying to convince you that this is a $20 million movie, especially people who know how movies are made. And I think that invitation is an exciting part of the process.
Yeah, and when you said childlike there, Kentucker, I feel like that's something that, when you're a kid and you're playing with your friends and you're like making up a story with little toys or cars and stuff, you don't think about the limitations. You're not like, this isn't a real, army man or a car. Like these are they're toys, but in my brain they're huge, And I think there was a lot of that where you're just like, we're going full steam ahead, and this is what we can do with what we've got, and we're gonna believe in it. And that idea of like all these different things coming together, we're just gonna believe that's gonna create a story, and not like doubt it. And yeah, like we said, it's hard. It was a hard shoot. It's even hard in the edit. The edit for months, it doesn't work, and you're just chipping away and you're rearranging and you're trying things. But you just have to have faith that you're going to get someplace with it and not give up hope. And there's something like, I sometimes say, you got to be like a little bit dumb with it, like you just have to believe that it's gonna work, and not like second guess or think too much about any one thing. It's like, let's just believe in these ideas that we've been working on and building, and now we're gonna film them, and now we're gonna put them together, and we're gonna get a brilliant musician to help, and at the end you just put it all together and you step back and you're like, okay, that's it. I think that's the movie. And because you've just been kind of following it, it brings you to some place, and that's where that's where the movie lives, in that final moment.
It felt very chasing of the carrot, meaning yeah, okay, then he's in this all pink room and everything's pink. Who knows how we'll do it, but there's an element of like, let's figure it out. And I was so impressed with the specificity and detail. There's even this quick shot. It might be when Preble's sort of first exploring Strawberry Mansion, where he opens the door and there's like that room full of photographs and that standing mannequin thing, and there's that kind of level of detail just speaks to this intention. But I'm curious, what were some of the compromises you had to make because of either budgeting or practical restrictions?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole, I think it might be on the Blu-ray. There's a whole scene, a whole long scene in the desert, and um, it might have been, 10 pages of dialogue or 10 minutes of film, and we were going to go out to a real desert out in California and film there. It was going to be a little pickup weekend shoot, and we were scheduled to go out there. I think we were planning on like April of 2020 was so that that didn't happen, and we ended up shooting some of it as like a safety back in December of 2019 on a green screen. So we had some footage of these scenes that we, for a while in the edit, we were putting into the desert. But at some point you're like, well, maybe if we had had a real desert here, it would have been this whole thing and it would have worked. But it's just not working. So you then in the edit have to figure your way through the story now without this huge section of the script. And I'll never forget, I think when Kentucker unlocked it, he said, I think we can just cut out this whole desert scene and it can just be this like caterpillar voyage through the ocean and through the desert. And it was like a eureka moment where it was like, oh my God, now the movie's like 10 minutes shorter. It feels so much better. It's way more dreamy. All this, bullshit dialogue we've been writing, we didn't need in that scene anyway. And so, it's like one of those things where the limitations ends up actually maybe in the end being like positive, creatively, it gets you to a new place.
Yes. So before I was reading about some stuff that you've said about the film, I was watching and going, oh my gosh, this is Pee-wee's Playhouse. Like, and then again, when I watched that first cloud scene, I was like, oh my! When I saw this, like that reminds me so much of like, because for some reason in Blue Velvet I so synonymized that closet stuff because they do so much of that scene work in there. I'm not even sure if that was intentional. I just know you had referenced some inspo there. But did any of those references actually shape specific moments in Strawberry Mansion? And if so, which ones?
I don't know if we were explicit about studying any particular scenes or moments from other films, but they're all in there. That Blue Velvet sequence is just like it's embedded so deep in our brains that I don't know if we were thinking about it directly, but when you think of like people whispering in a closet and hiding out in a closet, there are a number of cinematic influences that sort of are swimming in those waters. Pee-wee's Playhouse, obviously, we grew up watching, and production design wise was at a very formative time of our childhoods. That was what was entering our sight line, and we weren't trying to, I don't know if we ever mentioned Pee-wee Playhouse in the pre-production of it, but it definitely is in there. I can't think of anything directly that we were referencing, or that we sort of looked at and tried to mimic. Albert, can you think of any?
Not really. Like, I think the only thing with Tyler, our DP, is maybe mentioning like trying to get some of the lenses that they used on The Shining. Specifically like when they do like the zoom. The zooms in The Shining, and that might have been the only one where it was like, can we do something like that a couple times throughout the movie, like have these slow zooms. But yeah, like Kentucker said, I think you just live your whole life in all of these inspirations, these films and TV shows mix in your brain. And the hope is that they come out and they feel somewhat new, or people can enjoy the movie without having seen any of those references. And if there's people that have seen them, they can kind of recognize a few things here and there, but it is enough to feel fresh. It's like thinking of like Bob Dylan, who a lot of his early songs are like melodies from these old ancient, folk songs or Irish songs from hundreds of years earlier, but he brought something new to them with his lyrics and poetry. And it's like you just hope that you're bringing something new to this old long lineage of amazing films and storytelling. And it's like we all can't help but we're all human beings on planet Earth, kind of swimming in the same waters. So there's gonna be echoes, and I think that's beautiful. It's like the idea that 100 people will read one paragraph and then go make a film, and it'll be 100 different films. Like it's just by the very nature of us being who we are as individuals, it's going to be your own thing. And I think that's when the fun stuff happens, when you just kind of allow yourself to dream out these stories.
I think the only thing that comes to mind, and this wasn't even intentional at the time, but every time I think of the scene where they're plummeting to Earth as a comet, I think of the scene in Neverending Story with Falkor flying through the air.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I think Neverending Story more than anything was not necessarily when you watch the movie now what it feels like, but what it feels like when you watch it as a kid. Just sort of trying to summon some of that same melodrama, that same sort of life and death, sort of these dreamlike stakes that feel like just a juvenile understanding of the world, and like of terror and fear, and just trying to like allow ourselves as two grown men to tap back into those primal feelings of fear and of excitement, or whatever it is, whatever else emotion can be really crystallized into a simple moment.
Well, also, not to call us old, and you don't have to prescribe to this, but I was telling this really interesting artist that he was much younger, oh, have you seen the new Pee Wee Herman docu-series? And he goes, who's Pee Wee Herman? I was like, oh my gosh. But that definitely hit. But speaking of childlike, because that you used the word, and I think that there's that was very much my experience right from the licking of the ice cream cone. That I'm like, oh, this is play, and or the talking frog. There's just these elements that to use the word you used, Kentucker, feel like an invitation, actually. I'm assuming that was quite intentional. And what do you think that allows for the audience to do as part of their own journey watching the movie?
Yeah, I mean, I think that word play is an important one, because I think when we're on set and we've got the crew and everything is like going as planned, there is this feeling of like we are just make believe playing with like a bunch of adults. Like we're all adults, but we are pretending almost like we're kids, and we have state of the art cameras that are capturing it, but really it's just like it kind of gets silly or goofy a little bit. And I'm sure there's film sets where it doesn't feel like that because the subject matter is very intense, but I think like life is so intense on a day-to-day thing. You got to pay your bills, you got to like figure out how you're going to survive, how you're going to keep your body alive. And so when you're on a film set, it's kind of fun. I think the films we've made are kind of invitations, like you said, to like let's all play together. And then hopefully you do that, and the movie has a joy to it, a playfulness to it that people can respond to. And again, at the end of these long hard days, it's like maybe you want to put on a movie that kind of lets you feel lighter, or gives you a little bit of hope or joy in your heart. I know, like often as I get older, those are sort of the feelings I'm chasing when I put on a movie. I'm like, just take me
Yes.
away for 90 minutes, give
Yes.
me a little escape.
Yes.
So that's what we're, I think, and when you're a kid, life is simple. You don't have the bills. You don't have to worry about feeding yourself.
Yes.
So I think it's just kind of like trying to get back to that simple way of living and of kind of dreaming with your eyes open.
Yeah, and the invitation part of it is like we're inviting you. Not everyone's going to come to the party, and I think a lot of people see elements like that are just clearly just goofy or absurd, and they check out and they can't get past that. And I understand that because there's part of me that feels that way, and I feel like making this movie, I had to get beyond that because that's sort of the nature of the film. But I think the people who actually like those are invitations to turn off the logical brain, and once that's off, you can go a lot further for the people who are interested in that trajectory. I think it's very crucial to turn it off, though, because it is this sort of subconscious dreamlike state where we're asking people to enter. And I think that's where it kind of, for people who it works for, I think it gives them a chance to enter, like a subconscious awake state, which is very, very rare in a film or any piece of art. And I think it's worth the sort of the silliness of it to, and the potential alienation. You're alienating some of the audience, but you're allowing the other people who are left to really reach a deep place.
Well, I have the most logical brain. My partner's also a filmmaker. It drives him fucking nuts because I'll say like, why did she? But she just. I mean, that's just me. I can't help it. And yet that was not my experience with Strawberry Mansion at all. In fact, quite the opposite. I think what you said about awakening something did, and also Kentucker, you are such a grounding presence in the movie. Like you are working from just the energy that your Preble brings to the film feels so other in a way that grounds it in my own sense of truth and reality as an audience member, where I didn't find myself doing that because Preble wasn't really questioning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was the intent. I'm glad to hear you say that. It hasn't really come up a lot in our talking about this film, but I really appreciate that. That's a high compliment because that was the bridge that we were teetering between, which is Albert's untethered imagination and my kind of logic-based necessities of like getting through a particular piece of film or art. I hopefully like I was able in my performance and also just my input of just like trying to allow people who are more logical to like have a possible endpoint, even though I do think that it's still, there's a high barrier for entry for some people. But yeah, I think that was what I was trying to do with the performance, is just make it as realistic and small as possible. So it had a grounding force where if this person exists in this reality and they seem real, then it must be real.
Right. Even opposite, Penny, who it's not that it's big, but Penny Bella, Penny Fuller, who plays Bella, who sort of lived, or older Bella. It was giving Notebook vibe, the Notebook vibes too, guys. Did you ever hear that? I was giving a little Notebook vibes in a fun way, in a great way.
We wish.
Okay, but I want to talk about some of the effects for a second. So, and I do have to ask about one specific shot. So, you include all kinds of things, everything. Stop motion animation, some of course digital stuff. I want to talk about how it ultimately ended up being filmed, but even minis. There's a shot that I went back and that I was trying to suss out. The shot after, when they're on the island, it's sort of that seemed like a wide where you and Bella are holding each other on the island. You're shadowed and there's water in front. Is that just a mini of like the island and backdrop with some water in the front that you filmed? It's like 2 seconds.
This is when they're kind of like hugging each other.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a miniature island that we filmed in front of a real sunset and in front of real water. And then I
Oh.
think that shot, if I'm remembering, if it's the one where they're like he's like, we fell in love, and it's like kind of their silhouette. I think that was Kentucker and Grace filmed in the studio, so then
Put it
that
all
whole
together.
sequence was like, yeah, many layers. That whole island sequence was, there was miniatures, there was green screen, there was CG, there was things we had filmed months
Puppets.
apart, kind of. Yeah, it was all that kind of, we threw it all together in that scene because it was kind of like, this is when we're really entering, this dream, and time is no longer time as we know it, and anything goes kind of.
Well, this is not my question. This is just a statement. But there were times like at that point in the movie, I was like, fuck you. And what I mean by that is just like chasing the carrot. Like you kept yes anding, and I just loved it. It was like, and then all the way up into the comments, Kentucker, to your point of like, why not? But here's my question that I'm curious from a process standpoint. How did you work through that sequence? Is a great example. How you would tackle the world, meaning were you all like, oh, and maybe we could, and then try no, or we could? How did you work through the ways that you would add these effects in?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the effects were, okay, so backtrack a second. When we were first trying to make this movie, people were telling us this is going to be, $20 million to make this script.
Right.
And
Exactly.
we kept saying, no. There's so many different ways to do these effects that are, not the $20 million version. And I think what we just started doing was, for that sequence, as an example, you just do it like shot by shot. So you're like, okay, when they turn into beats, originally we made giant beat paper mache costumes for them to wear, because we thought, okay, at least we've got that. And we were editing with that. And then we said, you know what? I think we can replace their bodies with actual beats. And so we'll just now film actual beats in front of a green screen and then overlay those with their heads and get one of our VFX people to kind of like merge the two. But you just kind of like chip away at each different shot. And some shots you're like, this is a miniature. This shot is stop motion. This shot is going to be like digital VFX overlaid. And you don't get too like big picture with it. You just kind of like you film at the basics, what you need with your actors. You film like, okay, at least we've got something, and then you just kind of like put it in a folder and edit the rest of the movie. And then eventually it's like, okay, now it's time to figure out this sequence. And you just kind of go through it and see what you can do on your own, and then get some help from some friends who can do a little bit more than you. And it was very much just kind of like bit by bit chipping away until by the very end, we put it all to 16 millimeter. And that was our secret weapon. We knew, okay, if we've got all these different types of effects in different styles, they're going to become cohesive and flatten together when it all becomes, the film grain.
Which, specifically, your star turn as the I keep calling it the Blue Beast. What is it's her name?
That's close. We call it the Blue Demon.
Okay, Blue Demon. Also, that costume was very it fit you quite well. It was very slimming, Albert. I remember, like, I really think that costume was like very, very fitting.
Well, you know what? If we filmed that scene today, I think the Blue Demon might have a little belly on him. 5-6 years later,
the Blue Demon ate a lot of that meat. Yeah.
Well, a lot of the hamburger meat.
But then to do all this, to do what you're saying, it feels like you would need a team. Like, first of all, the first thing I would say is, okay, we're not going to do this for 20 million, but we're going to have a special effects supervisor. That's what we have to have, someone who's overseeing this, quote unquote. But
Uh,
it sounds like this was a real team effort and a core, sounds like maybe small team at that. Whether it's the costumes to the score, all of it felt like when you were putting together these folks, did you know who you wanted? Or what was the process of putting together that core team of creators?
yeah, I
Well,
mean, yeah, you go, Tucker.
I was gonna say, well, Albert's kind of secret weapon in that because he has a lot of abilities on the tech the VFX side, so he can kind of get it started, and he has the vision of it's all sort of filtered through his general aesthetic, and so he can handle a lot of the special effects himself, and then once we get those started, I think people can kind of get a sense of what we're after, of like sort of replicating this style or kind of get it close to what it feels like to look at this piece of effects. With like he did all the like hologram effects and a lot of the sort of more simple stop motion effects. And then from there we can kind of and I wouldn't say we had a particular team, an art team, effects team. I think we had sort of just sporadic help here and there. I would say that probably the most defining other participant beyond Albert is this guy Lawrence Becker, who did the more elaborate stop motion effects of like the skeleton and the
Graveyard.
the face melting and
So
the
good.
caterpillar, which is just a pipe cleaner,
Yeah.
that he maneuvered to make it look like swimming through the ocean like a dolphin. But
Yes.
and then we got lucky in that we had this university called the Art University, I think, in San Francisco, who like has this program where they get students to work on real indie features, and so we had a team that was like what felt like most like our art team, that because they had a lot of students working on specific effects. The Buffalo particularly comes to mind, which is a really crucial one to set the tone early of like, this looks real. And I think that one was probably our most technically elaborate effect. It looked like the most realistic for, and just like it had like a realism to it that the other stuff didn't have. But I think it was good to set the tone. So yeah, it was just piece by piece hodgepodge approach of getting this person to do these effects and these students to try and chip away at something like that for the Buffalo. Anything to add, Albert?
Yeah, well, just also like we got with 4 masks made by this local Baltimore mask making company called Clockwork Creature, and they made the 2 rats and the blue demon and the wolf head, and it's like, those 4 masks I remember were kind of a bunch of money for our little budget, but it was one of those things where it's like, this is going to add so much to see kind of these realistic heads mixed in with all of our other, less realistic paper mache heads. But just that idea of like, if we can just get these great artists to do something here, and then Lawrence Becker, this great stop motion artist, do something there, like all of that together is just going to like conjure and be this bigger thing than it than if we just did it kind of ourselves. But yeah, I mean, like the buffalo is a great example. We made like a buffalo. There was like a styrofoam head that we had someone carve, and it was just kind of this like big furry lump, and it looked interesting, but it looked kind of like a Muppet on Sesame Street or something, but we had enough to start with, and then we gave that to these students in San Francisco and kind of let them fill it out. And that's the kind of thing where I say, like, the day of shooting, you're like, it's not totally what it needs to be, but you just get enough to have something that you can build on, and just kind of keep layering until you've got the final product.
Well, I also noted the Buffalo moment because it was another sort of like throw my shoe at you moment because for those listening, the buffalo shot. There's a hole in the buffalo, or I'm maybe not shot, but it's bleeding of some kind. And what I took away from it, which I wanted to bring up, was just that it seemed like you were really fighting for simplicity. And what I mean by that is we see the buffalo breathing, we see the buffalo blink a few times, and that's all we really need to sort of, again, lay the groundwork for what the rules of the movie kind of are, and also to sort of like take us on this, what is quite an epic journey. Does it feel like, separate from just the practicalities, okay, like this is what we can do with the buffalo, which was great unto itself, was the idea of the simplicity and trusting that that would be enough an important piece of that as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think well, you mean the simplicity and sort of not sort of over emphasizing the movement of the buffalo, or the
like we don't need like 5 more shots of the buffalo and then you're in the front. We just sort of need the moment with you there. We set up that as Preble's entering Bella's dreams and like what he's finding, like we just need a moment of it. We don't need tons of it.
See, that's how I view it. See, as a cinematic viewer, I'm always sort of convinced by, I think less is more in a lot of ways, and that I think a lot of bigger budgeted movies just surplus, like everything in our culture. It's like a surplus of what you need, just because you can, or it's a show of wealth, or it's a show of resources. And as a viewer, I think all you're looking to do is convince somebody or communicate something, express something simple, and then once that's expressed, you can move on. And we think, well, yeah, like, but small things like that were very crucial. I'm glad you noted the blinks. There is like some breathing.
Yes,
there's a breathing that happens that's very convincing, I think, and then just sort of like moving the hand into the body. It just sort of like, a lot of that is sound effects, but also like it was built on some different layers of effects that once you have that, this isn't the point of the story is not this buffalo.
Right.
And it's just communicating a logic, communicating a poetry. And so once you sort of, and it would have worked without some of those details, but I think we were able to really use that as an example of like, you can trust us. Like, this is, we've thought through all this. We've spent a lot of time figuring all this stuff out. You can trust us to take our hand, and we'll walk you through this world, and we'll give you fun things to look at, but we're not going to give you too much.
Well, I think what you just said about building up trust with us too is right. I mean, like, I trust even more because I watched that moment. I'm like, wow, I'm in good hands. We always know that with a good piece of art. You're like, okay, I can sit back and enjoy the film because I don't have to be the asshole being like, yeah, but why is he walking over? I didn't have to do that.
I think that touches on something that I feel so deeply when you say in good hands. Like, I don't care if a filmmaker gets weird and experimental. I just want to feel like they are leading me, and that they know they have some kind of sense of where they're taking me. And I'll get lost with them as long as I feel like, okay, let me just trust them. Let me just sit in their hands as they take me along. Because sometimes you watch a film and you're like, I am lost. It's not fun being lost. I don't know if the filmmaker has any concept of where they're leading me, or have any idea of where this is, like what it feels like to be me watching this right now. So yeah, I love that idea of like, you're just like, you're in somebody's hands. They're leading you somewhere, and if you can just kind of like submit to that, that's a great feeling to like, I'm just going to give myself over because I'm in good hands.
Well, that's kind of why I even mentioned the room about the specificity with all those photos, because and I mean this positively, it felt like you were relentless in playing and finding senses of truths, of finding clarity, and therefore I didn't have to worry about it because it felt like no matter where we went, if all of a sudden we were going to become comets in the sky, there was going to be a consideration for what that would be. Okay, here's a practical question. Did you end up repurposing a lot of things with sets, costumes, and props?
You mean like repurposing from earlier?
Well, yeah, because so for those listening, this movie was made for $200,000, and when I look at or likely thereabouts, but when I look at the film, I'm even thinking, I know this is so stupid and so specific, but the costumes made of the film, the creatures that I'm assuming were just you, Albert, then at the edit, sort of adding those multiple versions of, but those, you can't tell me those were all made. Were those all individuals?
Oh, okay. So that's all individuals. We made about
Wow.
35 of those, and we had a little team uh, of people kind of always. Well, first off, in pre-production, we had a team unspooling old VHS tapes, so that was its own little thing. And we made it a game where who can unspool a VHS tape the fastest. And I think,
Okay.
someone got it down to like 5 minutes, maybe with like an electronic screwdriver. And then so we had all this tape, and then yeah, it was a bunch of old, thrift store clothes that we were hot gluing the tape, the black tape on. And then for that shot, we had 35 friends and family show up and walk through that field. And for the longest time, that wasn't in, it didn't make the film, and I was so bummed. But then we found a moment where, okay, it makes sense to show these tape people walking towards the house.
But it was such a good this is so basic, but I'm asking because there's that scene where Connie's on the floor, and unspooling and then sort of pulling the tape back from Preble, and that was kind of what I meant, like, because it's still shocking to me for how little you made this film for. That's why I was like, they had to repurpose everything. Like, what, did you have a lot donated? I mean,
yeah, okay, yeah. So check it out. I mean, it's kind of, there's a lot from thrift stores. There's a lot from garbage. At the time, I was working at the local video store here in Baltimore, Beyond Video, and people were just dropping off boxes and boxes of VHS tapes.
Got it.
We did, many of them we already had doubles of or triples of or had on DVD. So, I'd go through them and then just put the boxes in my car. So all the VHS were pretty much donated. The actual Strawberry Mansion house itself was a dollhouse that we found at a Baltimore thrift store for like $99, and then we built it and painted it up a little bit, but that was like $100 was a lot for us, but it was like an important prop. You know, yeah, it was all, and then like all of like the ad blocking helmet and the dream viewing machine were taken apart from other machines, free. People throw out their trash, they throw out like crazy old TVs or old VCRs or old computers, and you open those up and you have all of these, raw material. It's like there's clay inside that you can then hot glue, and yeah. So and I think when I said like the joy of pre-production, it's kind of all of that stuff where you're like, how are we going to populate this world? How are we going to show all of these machines and items, and working just with a couple of friends. Marnie Ellen Hertzler did a lot of those. She was a sculpture major. She's a filmmaker now, but she had like a sculpture background, so she was really crucial in kind of like the building some of these props. But it was just like, again, because we did it for so cheap and we did it our way. The pre-production kind of stretched on for months and months. It was like a whole spring and summer leading up to the fall shoot, and it was just every day kind of like, okay, what are we going to be building today?
Fun.
Or, okay, we're going to work on this element or this element. And it's just, it just comes back to that feeling of like, I'm just having fun. I'm playing with my friends, and, and then it shows up on the screen, eventually it's like all of that pre-production kind of silly, fun stuff becomes, all of these very important elements throughout the movie.
Well, crazy to me that you made all those, because I was surely going like, okay, they just doubled, and there was no, but I love that shot for what it's worth. Okay, this is such a hyper specific question, so sorry for our listeners, but this is more about me and my obsession with this movie than you guys listening. But so Reed's performance, Reed Birney, who I believe is of no relation. Is he of relation?
He's my uncle. Yeah.
Oh, stop. Wow.
Yeah, he's my dad's younger
Amazing.
brother.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm assuming most people know his work. He's terrific, great actor. His performance is so precise. And for me, so different from so much of what he's done and so unlikable. I mean, just for me, I just hated him so much. And no shade to Reed. That's a compliment. I'm just curious though, because I actually just felt like it was such a unique performance for Reed. Did you both sort of move him in that direction, or was that what he brought in?
I think we moved. I don't know. Excuse me. I think we moved him a little bit in that direction. I think we did. He is an actor with such gravity and seriousness. Like I think maybe to see him play what I consider a pretty hammy by design kind of villain. That I think maybe he was a little uncomfortable with that, but it was the kind of thing where we did several different. He was the kind of actor who can do a lot of different things in a very precise way. So we would do maybe 5 or 6 takes, and each time would be completely different. He's just a next level professional that, in terms of who we've worked with in the past, and how you work with somebody on that level of expertise and experience and professionalism. But I think I feel like the last take that we would always do with him, I think we'd try to sort of have him try to lean into some more of a caricature mode. And I think those were ultimately what we ended up going with, because for the most part, because I think this is actually somehow misunderstood in the film by some people, is that it's like that he is supposed to be a sort of a straightforward villain rather than a sort of campy villain. That was sort of introducing this second half of the film where we were allowing ourselves to go a little bit from the naturalism that my character presents into this more this like campy quality where you can sort of lean into like the absurdity of the global plot elements of this is this big shot guy who's going to tear down this whole system, and that's the sort of things that started to get a little bit loose and fun of we're not this is not based in realism, this is just cartoonish in some ways. Long story short, he was an incredible actor, and I would be curious to ask him that question, if he felt like that was the performance that he had in his head. There was with the connection to Albert, it was a little odd to be sort of directing a family member, and I don't know if exactly he knows Albert's style and has seen all of Albert's previous work, so I think he knew what he was walking into. But it's he has to kind of balance the family loyalty with the how he looks in his career.
Well, interesting, if I may, because I'm a big fan of your uncles, Albert. And actually, up till my two favorite, and I've seen pretty much everything he's done, stage and otherwise. And my two favorite performances of his were this, and actually his performance in High Maintenance. If you remember, you probably have seen it, Albert, for sure.
Yeah, that's a fun one where he gets naked in the hallway. He gets caught out in the hallway.
So good, Kentucky. If you haven't seen it, you have to watch him on his episode on High Maintenance. It's so good. It's so good. So yeah, please tell him that. So was it always the plan? It sounds like it was, that when you first met and started talking about the filming, that you, Albert, wanted Kentucker to play Preble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the earliest idea. So many years before it actually became a reality, was what was happening, what was swimming around in the brain. And I think it was also Reed was there very early on as kind of the son and villain, just because growing up watching Reed, acting, it was a very much formative experience of oh, look, that's a family member in a movie. Films are made by somebody. You can put family members in a movie. So it was always sort of a dream to get Reed in something. And I think it was I love him. I love him in the movie. I think he kind of comes into the film and I just love watching him because it's just fun. It's like,
The first
the ways
entrance,
yeah,
the
yeah,
first entrance, those glasses off. You're just like,
right,
oh, this prick. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And
yeah,
that affect, and that, I just to say that almost that slightly, I don't, not that this should be pejorative, but almost like effeminate affect,
mhm,
of this held man that is
yeah,
sort of, you just sort of, and then that's why when he's yeah, I loved it. I loved it. Uh, if
yeah.
oh, please.
No, the one thing I'll say, just add to what Kentucker said was, sometimes you ask an actor to just, okay, say that line, just keep going. We'll do a series of them. We'll keep the camera rolling. We won't reset. Just say the line like 5 times in a
Yep,
row.
yep,
And sometimes the actor just says it the 5 exact same way in a
yep,
row. And you're just like, okay, great. We can't, why do
yep.
we do that? But then with Reed, if you're like, Reed, do a series, he would say it like 8 different times, 8 different ways. And I was just like, it was the first time I was like, oh shit, like he's a good actor. He's been doing this a long time. He knows that that's what we want. We want for the edit, we want it different ways. And he'd always give you just the exact amount of time in between each one, you're like this ain't his
Yes,
first rodeo. He's been
exactly.
doing this a couple decades longer than we're alive.
But also, if
Yeah.
I may, to give Connie Schulman her due too, those little things like when she pushes the son when she's walking out of the room, or like she sort of seems to found these energy, or even that moment when you're fighting with that film
Hmm.
and she sort of tugs back at it. She's also just great. Okay, now getting back, so Kentucker is Preble. How did you two divide and conquer then when it came to directing this film? How did you sort of find the balance of, and Albert, obviously you're in it too, and in those sort of two important cameos. I love the Toad returning. When they're on the beach, how did you balance acting, producing, and sort of just steering the whole ship amongst the two of you?
You want to take that out?
Yeah, that's the big one. Well, first off, I just want to say that I don't think I really had to think about or like how Preble should do something, which was such an amazing gift for Kentucker to be directing with me, but also just to like hold Preble and know exactly, how Preble should act and all that. And I think I only realized that later when you look back and you're kind of like, oh yeah, I've never thought about Preble's performance in a way, which is like the lead character, but it's like he's keeping so much of that ship sailing. And when I think about directing this, it's like all there's just people coming up to you all day, right? Just like asking questions, and there's two of us, so like the actors are coming up to Kentucker. Grace is coming to Kentucker, Reed's maybe coming to Kentucker, asking questions about how they should do the scene differently or the same. The art department's coming up to me, asking me questions about that. We're both talking with Tyler about, where the camera's going. And it's just kind of like the nice thing about having the two of us is like, okay, I have to answer half the amount of questions than if it was just me. And we're really kind of like seeing where our strengths are and where we can do the most kind of productive work, and that's where we're naturally kind of going. Um, and then in the edit, it's very much just like both of us just chipping away at it and having ideas and shooting them back and forth, and just kind of like we're like sanding this thing together to get it to be its final shape. Um, and I think what drew us together in the first place when we made Silvio was just that we're kind of coming from two very different filmmaking backgrounds, and kind of saw in the other person something that we didn't have in our own work, and kind of a way to like expand the type of films that we've each been making on our own, kind of to this new place. And I think the people that you know watch Kentucker's earlier films or my earlier films, and then they see these films, they can kind of see like it's both of them in here. And it's what I enjoy about it is it elevates it to this place that's like, this kind of third idea. Like when two people are kind of collaborating in a way that's very positive, this third thing happens, which is like, I couldn't have gotten there by myself. You couldn't have gotten there by yourself, but together, we put our sensibilities together, and it creates this new kind of thing. And I think that's happening in, pre-production, writing, filming, editing, all stages. You're kind of in this dance of like mashing your two selves together.
Kentucker, anything to add?
That was I as well stated. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to that. I think I'm just hearing a little mouse in my kitchen right now.
It's one of the rat sailors.
But also, I think, yeah, little rat sailor. But also that was beautifully put. So I would second that.
So I just have to ask this basic question, but it's important because it's the way that you sort of tie with the building of this film, like you were saying, chipping away one piece at a time. But there were undoubtedly, or I assume, some major unexpected challenges. Maybe not major, maybe minor. But what were some of those unexpected challenges, and how did you problem solve?
It's funny because as the years have gone on, I think you purposely forget a lot of the challenging things so that you have these rose tinted glasses and you can make another film because you're like, oh wow, we did it. It was so easy, I don't.
It's the kind of thing where, like, you want to hear challenges of our new film? We got plenty of those happening now.
Yeah.
We've wiped all the challenges of this one all away pretty efficiently.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the biggest challenge is always the money.
Yep.
Getting the money, even though it's only $200,000, that's still a lot of money.
Yep.
You still need that much money, and you still need to build a team. You still need to convince people that this is a real thing. I mean, Albert wrote a draft of the script, whatever, like 7 or 8 years before we ended up filming it. So it was a lot of time from original inception to completion, and challenges that entire time in terms of, first of all, just getting it to a place that anybody reads it. Then you have a fucking narcissistic actor like me who it gets sent the script and doesn't respond. And then, you have the challenge of like, okay, well, what do I do? What do I do now? And then, so, and then like, how do I get the first person involved? Like, how do I get the second person involved of like, who's going to build this with me? And then when you have some pieces of puzzle, then it starts to get a lot easier, but then you're sort of delegating who's doing what and who's fundraising. And I think a big piece of the puzzle that got fixed was Albert and I meeting and really liking each other and wanting to go on this journey together. And sort of, it took me about 3 or 4 years after he sent me the script for me to understand what was in there. And like he said, I was coming from a very different cinematic background, very naturalistic, low, like no effects, no costumes, no fantasy. It's just very realism. And I saw in him this new path because I was sort of felt like I had said what I wanted to say with that type of movie. And with him, when I met him, I started to see this new world open up, and I was like, I want to see where that leads, because I want to challenge myself, and I also want to, I want to express something different. And once I started really connecting with Albert, the movie started making sense. Like the script started making sense. And then when I stopped really trying to parse it out so
literally,
logically, yeah, literally. And once then it all just started sort of, it doesn't, it's a dream. And also it's not logical because it doesn't have to be, because it's a film. And once I accepted that it didn't have to make sense completely, and that was the magic of it, and you didn't have to like spell out like, how would this come to be in reality? Like, how would the government do this? And how could the people not know? And how could the companies get a piece of that without like, it's just like all those questions that I think some people still have. I just had to realize that that's not the film. That's not important. and then so then I'm on board with the vision, and then so now it's a team, and now that helps a lot with just like generating the momentum and the energy that it takes for a movie to start happening, and then and then from there you go on. But it's like we had to make another film to start we made a whole other film just to kind of prepare to make Strawberry Mansion, and to figure out how it could run. And so like the challenge of the film is like you have to make it another film first,
Yeah.
and then you have to raise, you have to like apply for grants, and you have to reach out to investors and make a pitch deck, and reach out to producers, and that's all just like you're nowhere for years
Yeah.
while all that's happening, and we've already failed at our career. Like we've already been trying to do this for 15 years. Like we're nowhere. We've made, he made films. I had made 4 films before this. Did not, no one saw them. Didn't work. The career's dead.
Mhm.
And then you have to rebuild from that. That's what I was alluding to earlier, which is this lack of confidence. Like that was a big struggle of the film. It's like I don't know what people want from me. I don't know what I have to give. I'm so beaten down by this industry.
Yeah.
That it's just sort of like, oh, those are the challenges. And then when you get to make the film, that's easy. Like, all that stuff's easy. Post, you have the money, you have the people in play, the effects, the costumes, the on-set stuff. That's just a breeze compared to the mountain you have to climb to get to that point.
Yeah, and I think what Kentucky said earlier about like us saying it was the last movie, I think all of that was just like building up until it's like this is it. Like we've been working on this for years, and we've everything in our life is leading to this moment, and it's a little dramatic, but you just feel that way when you're finally doing it. You're like, this is it. This is the last time. Let's leave it all out here on the court. And one other real quick challenge was, once the two of us were aligned, it's like, yeah, finding these producers who are going to say yes instead of no. Like so many people are like, well, this is a $20 million film. It's like, okay, thanks for having this conversation. You're not our producer. And when we finally found Emma and Taylor and Sarah, they all had kind of different backgrounds and different strengths as producers. But I think the one thing they all shared was like, they believed that we knew what we were doing, and they wanted to just give us the space to like do our thing, and had faith that we would keep the train moving forward, and gave us the tools to kind of do that. But yeah, that didn't just like happen overnight. People come up to me and they're like, how did you all find your producers? And it's like, made lots of films for many years without producers, and kind of did everything just doing it ourselves to then eventually get to a spot. It's not like maybe some people are lucky and they just like, as they're starting out, find the perfect producer collaborator. But I mean, I think it was many kind of trial and errors, and just different projects leading up to, okay, this is, the universe is aligned. These 3 people have kind of found their way into our orbit, and now we're just going to go off and get weird together.
And we didn't even get we didn't get anybody until we won our grant,
Yeah.
Baltimore grant. That sort of like was the first chunk of money, and then it was not real at all. It was just me and Albert toiling away, and basically just Albert at a certain point, because I was like, Jesus Christ, how is this going to happen? and then we won this grant, and then from there, like you have some money to hire people. You have some people. You have some money to start moving around and start saying like, once you start paying people, then you start having a team, you start having a crew, you start having
accountability,
motion. And before that, like if you have no money to even begin, it's just like no one who's gonna,
it's hard to have faith.
These are lifelong friends you need to like ask them to work for free, before if no one's getting paid, and
Well, this might be the same question then, in some ways, but what would you say to a filmmaker who's listening or watching, who wants to make something as strange and honest, but also doesn't necessarily have any money or maybe big connections yet?
I mean, I would say just start making something, And that's what Kentucker and I both did at the beginning. We just grabbed a camera and some friends and started making movies, very different types of movies. Well, the two of us were making, but they were at their core, they had that same no budget thing where I'm not going to wait around for the big, money to flow in. I'm going to start making things, whether it's music videos, whether it's, feature length mumblecore films. You're just doing something and you're learning, and the next time you do something, you do it a little teeny bit differently, or a little bit, quote unquote, like better, because you've gotten a little bit of uh age, or just kind of you know what's not working. And you just do that for a while, and it's not like a glamorous life. We're working day jobs, and you're living very cheaply, but you're happy because you're making things, and I think the
Right.
joy for both of us comes from the making, and from the artistic expression through film. And you could wait around, and nothing, your whole life will go by and you'll have nothing to show because you've just been waiting, right? So it's just like, the advice I would give is just do what you can do now. What is available to you now. There's actually a lot more available to you than you think. You can you know find amazing costumes at a thrift store, or different sets in your friend's basement might look a certain way, or you go out into the forest and you've got an amazing location. And these are this kind of stories to start with. And you can do big fantasy on a small budget. It's all about what you believe. And I'd say the other thing is just like, what do you want to say? What's the thing inside of you that needs to come out in a film, or in a song, or in any kind of artistic expression, in a poem? What's that, like, that's thing? Find that thing, and let that guide you. And if you're being true to that thing, then the final product will have a feeling of truth to it, and will have a feeling of you know uh real life, or just kind of like, even though it's a fantasy film, it has a feeling of honesty, because we're being honest with what we're trying to say.
Period. Kentucker?
But Albert's always the cheerleader for more people making films. I'm always like, no, don't. I mean, yeah, I think it's just about sort of like, it goes along with that, but just sort of like like redefining the expectations of what it is to make films, and what it is that you're looking to achieve from a film. I think you can't go wrong if you're just chasing a process, if you're chasing just an adventure of like, this is just something I want to try to do. I'm not trying to get anywhere with it. I'm not trying to convince the world. I'm trying to get this thing out of me that I felt, or this vision that I had, even if it's simple as like, what star is Strawberry Mansion? A man in a field with a suit heading towards a house. Albert had that feeling. I want to see this image. He created the image, and he didn't even have to create a whole movie out of it. He could have created that one image, posted on TikTok or something, which is probably a much better way to build an audience. But, I guess movies have more credibility somehow. But yeah, I think just connecting to the process of it. And that's what that was what started for me initially, is I want to just, I just want to, like, I have these ways of talking, for instance, talking to my parents, my siblings, my friends. I just want to capture the way that I'm talking to them. And then it may sound simple, but I feel like there's truth in that. And then you make a movie of the way you talk to your parents, the way you talk to your, somebody who you're trying to, a woman or a partner that you're seeking out. You're like, oh, there's something interesting in a simple exchange of like one person talking to another person, and then they talk slightly different when they're around somebody else. That's I think what I was initially chasing. Very small thing, but it wasn't about, I want to be a famous filmmaker, I want to be a rich filmmaker. It was like, I am interested in the poetry of real life, and capturing the poetry, and sort of experimenting with who I am by like seeing how how I would craft an interaction with another person, and then kind of seeing how I look when I play that back in a movie form. This I've never said that, and it probably shows because it's a very scattered thought, but I don't know, that's just what was coming to mind as far as like when I was really, if I'm really being honest about what my initial inspiration was to make films, I think it was a lot about just capturing how people talk.
Well, if I may, there's something in both of what you just said, both the essence of something as simple as that, trying to better understand and share and chase how you communicate, and just being in also a place of action, not necessarily, Albert, as you were saying, overthinking, but just go make, what are we waiting for? It sounds like this project is such a great example of that, where it sounds like there was huge waves of like, okay, creative inspiration, and then I don't know if this is ever going to happen. So, and then, oh, here we go. But, one foot in front of the other. I'm super grateful to, if nothing else, to talk through just what was a super inspiring and entertaining film for me. That's why that last question means something to me too, about what you would just say to folks, because a lot of times artists just get stuck. We all do. We're saying this, it's hard. It's fucking hard. And so there was, again, for me, I use the word freedom because that's ultimately, and in a very, very general sense, what the film sort of represents for me in a lot of different ways. And grateful to have you guys on. We really appreciate you being here today. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.